Oh my god, MacBooks have promotion now. 120 hertz is gonna be on my phone and my iPad and my Mac. Yes, for those curious, I did order an M1 Max Mac. Oh boy, this is gonna be a mouthful, isn't it? Naming was not the way we thought, but there are quite a bit of options and a lot of news to go through for today's event, which I was in love with from end to end. Let's begin. First of all, HomePod Mini now comes in orange, blue, yellow. That'll be available later, but yeah, more colors for the HomePod Mini. Also, for the first time since the original AirPods were unveiled, Apple actually had AirPods unveiled in an event. All of the AirPods before this were done via site refresh, so I was very shocked and surprised they decided to do it today, but they're pretty dang great in my opinion. They've got a new custom driver, so they should allow for more bass. Sound quality overall should be improved. They have 6 hours of battery life outside of the case, and once you combine that battery life with the new charge case, which supports Magsafe, that kind of blew my mind. It's actually magnetically gonna work now. You get a total of 30 hours of listening time, so that's a whole 6 hours longer than AirPods 2, which are still being sold on Apple's site now for $130, although that's without the wireless charge case. But now AirPods 3, of course, come by default with a wireless charging case for $180. Great value, amazing sound quality, I'm sure. I ordered a pair of AirPods 3. I can't wait to try them out, and they support spatial audio as well as they're now sweat and water resistant. And a tiny detail that was probably easy to miss is Apple has now updated the AirPods Pro charging case to support MagSafe as well. So I believe this means if you buy an AirPods Pro from here on out, you'll be able to dock it with MagSafe and it will actually magnetically attach, which should be pretty nice. You don't have to just align it exactly right. It's a little detail, but one I certainly cared about. So I'm very, very thankful AirPods 3 ended up being cheaper than I expected and got better battery life. That's awesome. And before we get into the Macs, we should probably talk about this new subscription service that Apple just launched, which is pretty dang weird. Apparently, they have this new option for Apple Music called Apple Music Voice, and it's sort of like, I'm trying to find a good way to describe it. It's kind of like Pandora in that, okay, you don't have like the Apple Music library where you can play any song you can think of on command and find an album and find the song you want. This is instead $5 a month, not 10, and for $5 a month, you can call out to Siri to play specific types of playlists, play music like this, play this genre. I'm not even sure if you can say specifically play this one song, but as long as you control it through Siri, you'll have access to the entire Apple Music library. You just don't get to, specify which songs you want to listen to next, which I actually think might be pretty popular, especially among HomePod buyers, because a lot of people might just say, play this kind of music, play rock music or play chill music, and then it will just start playing random music. And there's still no ads, but it's substantially cheaper than standard Apple Music, and you just get a bit less control over what music is playing. I actually think that's kind of cool and fairly affordable, so I'm very curious to see what the take rate on this new Apple Music tier is. I get that it's confusing. I probably didn't even explain it very well, so apologies in advance. But let's talk about what's far more interesting, M1 Pro and M1 Max. Apple took their own silicon to new heights and new levels to the point that we're seeing Apple Silicon powered devices cost more than we've ever seen cost before. It's actually pretty mind-boggling, and the one thing you should know about these chips, first of all, the leaks got a lot correct. The M1 Pro has 8 high-performance cores and 2 efficiency cores. Same thing with the M1 Max, but the main difference is the Max comes with a 32-core GPU, whereas the M1 Pro comes with a 16-core GPU. So both are still substantially faster than the typical M1, but Apple was saying during this event to expect the M1 Max GPU to rival the best graphics cards in laptops available, except it'll be working on a fraction of the power, and you won't have to choose between, like, it's really powerful when plugged in, but the performance is compromised when unplugged. They're saying you should still expect an insane amount of performance even when you're on battery power. So those are the fundamental basics from the event, but as we've discovered with the configurator, there is a lot of CPU and GPU binning going on. There's actually a crap ton of options if you're opting for the 14-inch MacBook Pro. The base model, which now starts at $2,000, so I was wrong. These actually do come with a bit of a price hike. For $2,000, you get an 8-core CPU, which I assume means 6 high-performance cores and 2 efficiency cores, and you can spend $200 more to actually get the full full 8 high-performance cores. And still, keep in mind, even the base version of the M1 Pro is going to be substantially faster than the M1, certainly much faster than most students or most average consumers need. These are absolutely pro tools. Most of these are going to be faster than the Intel 16-inch MacBook Pro with an i9 chip. So it's still an upgrade nonetheless, but they have lots of different GPU tiers to choose from. They have a 24-core GPU for the M1 Max. They have a 14-core GPU and a 12-core GPU for the M1 Pro. Lots of different GPU tiers to choose from, but the end consensus is mostly the same. You spend extra, you get more performance. So whatever your budget is, spec out whatever Mac you want to fit that budget, and that's how you maximize your performance levels. Unified memory with the RAM doesn't seem to be different. It starts at 16 gigs of RAM for the M1 Pro, whereas if you get the M1 Max, it starts at 32 gigs of RAM, but both can be configured up to 64 gigs of RAM, which is the same as it was before. Same story with the SSDs, which have incredibly fast write speeds. We're now talking with the M1 Max up to 400 gigabits per second, and with the M1 Pro 200 gigabits per second. So these things are extremely fast in the speed department, but still 8 terabytes maximum, but both start with 512 gigs, which is good for me. But oh man, there's so many design changes with this one. Of course, the biggest one I'm most excited for, ProMotion, is finally on the Mac. So we can clock out our laptops to 120 hertz, which is just, it's gonna look so buttery smooth. And to maximize battery life, of course, it will dynamically change depending on what you're doing. However, the design it seems to be a controversial one. I'm very happy to be on this side of history. Back when the 24-inch iMac came out, a lot of people loved it, but I personally hated it. Now it's kind of the opposite. I think a lot of people hate this new design because it's a bit thick and it's a bit different from what you're used to. Obviously, the notch is there. That rumor ended up being correct, and Apple seems to be embracing it pretty heavily, which honestly I was not expecting. I thought they would blend it into the dark mode menu bar a tad more, but for quite a lot of images, they just flat out keep it there, which I'm fine with because there's a notch on my iPhone and I don't really care, and there's a notch on this, which I don't really care because it allows the side bezels to be much thinner than they were before, substantially more pixels than the previous generation, and this new design approach allows for a 14-inch MacBook Pro, whereas before we were capped out at 13 inches. And I think the main reason I don't think the notch is that big a deal, despite everyone panicking about it right now, is that you basically have the option of turning it off. They show so many apps that essentially just black out the menu bar so you don't even see the notch. The notch depth is the same depth as the 16-inch MacBook Pro forehead. So if you preferred having a thicker border at the top to accommodate the camera, you can still change it back to the way it used to be. And if you want to embrace the notch and have your menu bar up there so it's out of the way of your display, you still have that option. So I don't really see it much as taking away as much as I do expanding the display all the way up to the edge. So now that we have a pretty equal size display all the way around. The side bezels are even thinner than the 16-inch MacBook Pro side bezels, which got me excited. And the top bezel is like 60% thinner minus the notch. So I can tell this is going to be a hot take for a lot of people, but I'm in love with this design. Like, I love the redesigned feet. I love how they made it a tad thicker, and they brought all of these legacy ports back. Those rumors ended up being true. Magsafe 3 has made its triumphant return, although this time much better because these new MacBook Pros have removable USB-C to MagSafe cables, which means if you want to charge via USB-C or you want to replace just the MagSafe end of the cable, the power brick, will allow for that. These new MacBooks even support fast charging now, 50% in 30 minutes, which is cool. And the 16-inch models come with a 140 watt brick, which is just insane. 70 watt hour battery on the 14-inch model, whereas 100 watt hour battery on the 16-inch model. And you can charge via USB-C if you still would like that option, which I was a little bit concerned about, like they would make MagSafe the only way to charge it. I'll appreciate MagSafe as it's there, but I still want the occasional option to charge from the right when I feel like it. They have 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports on this machine alongside HDMI, which I don't think is 2.1. Apple didn't specify, but given it says it supports 4K at 60 hertz, I'm assuming it's an HDMI 2.0 port. And they also brought back the SD-XC card slot, so fairly high transfer speeds there. And the headphone jack remains, although this time it supports, I guess, higher bandwidth. So if you want to do more lossless playback through the headphone jack, you'll be able to. I think a lot of the renders and images, because of its more squared off design, design make it seem a lot thicker than it really is, because comparing it to the old 16-inch MacBook Pro, it's actually only 0.02 inches thicker. So essentially the same thickness. Basically for the 16-inch model, it's the same footprint, whereas for the 14-inch, roughly the same footprint, but just a tiny bit thicker. And also heavier. The 16-inch MacBook Pro is now 4.7 pounds for the M1 Pro, and bizarrely enough, if you opt for the M1 Max, it's actually a tad bit heavier, 4.8 pounds. So Apple actually went heavier with laptops. How crazy is that? I think it's fair to say people buying a 16-inch MacBook Pro with this kind of performance, they're not doing it for portability. You know, they want something really, really powerful. Save the light laptops for the MacBook Air, you know? They have updated the webcam now to be full 1080p, and that took them way too long. However, I was kind of hoping we would get center stage. It's like you can bring this ultra-wide camera to the $300 iPad. You can't bring it to the MacBook. I don't know. Maybe it's because the ultra-wide lenses take up too much space and the display lid on MacBooks is very thin. So we got a way better webcam now, twice as many pixels, and improved speaker performance with 80% more bass, improved microphone performance, also thanks to the image signal processor and upgraded studio quality microphones built into the hardware. The keyboard layout I think looks great. The fact that they give you full-size function keys now alongside Touch ID, that looks wonderful to me. Some people don't like it, but I dig the look personally. I will miss the touch bar though. I appreciated it when it was there. I get that most people don't like it. I'm gonna miss it, but it's fine. I can live without it. I was somewhat hoping they would actually pull what they did with the 24-inch iMac and build in an Ethernet port to the power adapter. I thought that would have been kind of smart if someone wanted direct Ethernet access for when they use their MacBook attached to a dock, but they didn't decide to do that. Oh well, it's still got Wi-Fi 6, which it actually didn't have for a long time, so I'm glad it finally does. But the biggest no-show of today was no M1 Pro Mac Mini. A lot of people really thought Apple would wipe the Intel Mac Mini off the face of the earth this morning, and they decided not to. I'm wondering if it's because maybe TSMC is upping their prices for Apple Silicon and selling a Mac Mini at that low a price with a CPU and GPU that powerful might have not been too profitable for Apple. I don't know if they're planning it for later. The way Tim Cook was talking, it doesn't sound like there's going to be another Apple event next month. I don't think they need to wait 30 days just to tell you, okay, now it's in an iMac and a Mac Mini. So I'm pretty sure this is our last Apple event of the year. But for me, at least, despite being under an hour, it was still very eventful because I wanted ProMotion like never before. And of course, now they're mini LED. They have the extreme dynamic range. The bezels are thinner. The notch, I guess, is just throwing so many people off. But I think it's because every image of the notch that annoys people is like an image of a Mac that you will never see. You're never just gonna blow up a picture and take up every single pixel. Most of the time on Macs, you have a black menu bar stretched across the top. You can choose to just leave it like that when you get these new MacBooks, but they are available to order now, and mine will deliver next Tuesday, so not tomorrow, but a week from tomorrow. And I maxed out the storage because I'm gonna be taking a lot of trips and I've been filming a lot of footage. So I got 8 terabytes of storage, which I know is insane. I also got the M1 Max chip with the maxed out GPU core to test out for you guys because I can't wait to see how fast those graphics are. 32 gigs of RAM because I've never had an issue with RAM in the past, and this is unified memory, so I know I'm not gonna really need much more than 32 as is. Not really sure if I should have opted for the 32 core GPU. I think it'll depend on how the performance of this MacBook is. That's probably the one thing I should have considered opting for the 16 core option on, but we'll see how all of this does shortly. I've got a lot of thoughts that I'm sure will change over time, so stay tuned, more videos to come. But overall, your Apple Sheep here is happy because he got 120 Hertz and he got an insane amount of performance, and I think this is just going to be game-changing specifications for the laptop industry. Intel, you're screwed. Eat your heart out. And I'm so thankful that we got so much of Apple listing in this generation of the product. So anywho, let me know what your favorite part of Apple's event was. I'm sorry that the prices were a tad higher than we were expecting, but I actually think they're more reasonable for the higher spec configurations. Now a maxed out MacBook Pro is like $6,000. I'm pretty sure it used to be higher than that, but yeah, starting price of 16 inches, $2,500, 14 inches, $2,000. But I think it's because if you're the type of person that needs an M1 Pro or the M1 Max, you're probably going to be willing to spend that extra money to get this insane amount of performance. And if you don't have $2,000 to spend, then you know what? MacBook Air is still going to be great, much better value. But feel free to let me know your thoughts down below. This is your Apple Sheep here. I'll see you guys in the next one.